12-year-old Kai Johnson stood at the edge of Miami International Airport's busy terminal, his small hands gripping a boarding pass so tightly that the paper was starting to wrinkle. The sounds around him were overwhelming. Announcements echoing through speakers, suitcase wheels rolling across the floor, and hundreds of conversations mixing together into one big noise. This was his first time flying alone, and everything felt huge and scary. The airport seemed to stretch on forever, with its high ceilings and endless corridors filled with people rushing in every direction. Kai had never seen so many people in one place before. His mom, Linda, had dropped him off just 30 minutes earlier. She had wanted to walk him all the way to the gate, but the security rules said she couldn't come through without a ticket, so she had hugged him tight at the security checkpoint, whispered "I love you" in his ear, and watched as he walked through the metal detectors by himself. "You're going to have the best time with Grandma Rose," she had told him that morning while helping him pack his small suitcase. "And remember, you're flying first class. That means you get a really nice, comfortable seat and good food, too." Kai still couldn't believe it. First class sounded so fancy, like something rich people did in movies. His mom had been saving money for months to buy this special ticket. She worked long hours at the hospital as a nurse, sometimes pulling double shifts just to make ends meet. But she had insisted that for his first solo flight, nothing but the best would do. "I want you to feel safe and comfortable," she had explained, while ironing his best white shirt the night before. "First class means the flight attendants will take extra good care of you." Now standing in the terminal with his small backpack and that precious boarding pass, Kai felt anything but comfortable. He looked down at his outfit, the crisp white button-up shirt his mom had bought specially for this trip, dark blue pants, and his newest sneakers. She had even made him wear a little tie, though he kept fidgeting with it because it felt too tight around his neck. "You look so handsome and grown up," she had said with tears in her eyes that morning, "just like a little businessman." Kai checked his watch, a simple digital one his mom had given him for his birthday. He still had 2 hours before his flight to New York City, but she had insisted he arrive early. "Better safe than sorry," she always said about everything. He found a seat near his gate and pulled out his phone to text his mom. She had gotten him the phone just for this trip, loaded with her number, Grandma Rose's number, and strict instructions to call if anything went wrong. "Made it to the gate okay," he typed with his thumbs, still getting used to texting. "Lots of people here." His phone buzzed back almost immediately. "Good job, baby." "Remember what we practiced. Show your ID and boarding pass when they ask. Be polite. You've got this." They had practiced the whole routine at least 10 times at home. Kai knew exactly what to say and do. He had his ID in his wallet, his boarding pass in his hand, and his confidence. Well, that was still building. Looking around the waiting area, Kai noticed he was definitely different from most of the other passengers. There were business people in expensive suits typing on laptops, families with designer luggage, and couples wearing clothes that probably cost more than his mom made in a week. He was one of the few kids around and certainly one of the few black kids in the first-class boarding area. His stomach started to feel a little funny, like it did before big tests at school. He tried to remember what his mom always told him when he felt nervous. "Hold your head high, speak clearly, and remember that you belong anywhere you want to be." Kai's mind wandered to why he was making this trip. Grandma Rose, his mom's mother, lived in a small apartment in Brooklyn. She had been asking for him to visit for years, but money was always tight. This summer, though, his mom had finally saved enough for the ticket. "Your grandmother is getting older," she had explained, "and she wants to spend time with her favorite grandson before—" She hadn't finished that sentence, but Kai understood. Grandma Rose was 78 and had been having some health problems lately. This might be one of his last chances to visit her. The thought made him both excited and sad. He loved his grandmother's stories about the old days, her amazing cooking, and the way she always made him feel like the most important person in the world. But he also knew his mom was worried about her, and that worry had been keeping her up at night lately. As he sat there thinking, Kai couldn't help but wonder about his father. His parents had divorced when he was really small, so young that he barely remembered them being together. All he knew was that his dad was supposedly some kind of businessman who traveled a lot for work. His mom didn't like talking about him much, and Kai had learned not to ask too many questions. Sometimes, though, he would catch his mom staring off into space with a sad look on her face. Or he would notice her looking at old photos late at night when she thought he was asleep. There were pictures of a tall, handsome man with kind eyes, but they were tucked away in a box under her bed. "Your father loves you," she would say when the topic came up. "He just has a complicated life. Maybe someday you'll understand better." Kai had stopped trying to understand a long time ago. His mom was enough. She worked harder than anyone he knew, always made sure he had what he needed and loved him more than anything in the world. That was all that mattered. The boarding announcement snapped him out of his thoughts. "Ladies and gentlemen, we will now begin boarding Flight 447 to New York LaGuardia. We'll start with our first-class passengers." Kai's heart started beating faster. This was it. He stood up, smoothed down his shirt, and got in line with the other first-class passengers. Most of them were adults, and he felt very small among all the tall, well-dressed people. But he remembered his mom's words. "You belong there just as much as anyone else." Taking a deep breath, Kai stepped forward in line, his boarding pass ready in his hand. He had no idea that in the next few minutes his whole world was about to change. He didn't know that this simple flight would become anything but simple. And he certainly didn't know that somewhere in Atlanta, the man whose company name was printed on his boarding pass was about to discover something that would change everything. For now, Kai was just a 12-year-old boy, trying to be brave on his first solo adventure, carrying his mother's love and his grandmother's expectations with him as he stepped toward the gate. Kai walked up to the gate counter with his boarding pass held out in front of him, just like his mom had taught him. The flight attendant behind the desk was a woman with blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun and bright red lipstick. Her name tag read Patricia. "Boarding pass and ID, please," Patricia said without looking up from her computer screen. "Here you go," Kai said politely, handing over both items with a small smile. Patricia glanced at the documents, then did a double take. She looked at Kai, then back at the boarding pass, then at Kai again. Her eyebrows went up and she called over her shoulder to another employee. "Hey, Monica, can you come here for a second?" Monica, an older woman with gray hair and glasses, walked over. Patricia whispered something to her while pointing at Kai's boarding pass. Both women stared at him like he was some kind of puzzle they couldn't figure out. "Is there a problem?" Kai asked, his voice smaller than he intended. The confidence his mom had helped him build was starting to crack. "Well, honey," Patricia said with a fake sweet smile, "this is a first-class boarding pass. Are you sure you're in the right place? Maybe your parents made a mistake." Kai felt his cheeks get hot. "No, ma'am, there's no mistake. My mom bought me a first-class ticket to visit my grandmother in New York." Monica stepped forward, looking skeptical. "Where's your mom now? Why isn't she here with you?" "She had to go to work," Kai explained patiently. "I'm 12. I'm old enough to fly by myself." She filled out all the paperwork for unaccompanied minors. The two women exchanged looks that made Kai's stomach twist. Other passengers in line behind him were starting to get impatient, shifting their weight and checking their watches. "Let me see that boarding pass again," Monica said, taking it from Patricia's hands. She examined it like she was looking for hidden clues, turning it over and holding it up to the light. "This doesn't look right," she announced loudly enough for other passengers to hear. "The print quality seems off. And frankly, I find it hard to believe that a child would have a legitimate first-class ticket without adult supervision." Kai's heart started pounding. "Ma'am, I promise it's real. My mom saved up for months to buy it. She wanted me to be comfortable on my first solo flight." "Uh-huh," Patricia said, not believing him at all. "And what's your mother's name? What does she do for a living?" "Linda Johnson. She's a nurse at Miami General Hospital," Kai said, his voice getting shaky. He didn't understand why they were asking so many questions. Monica laughed, but not in a nice way. "A nurse? Honey, nurses don't buy first-class tickets for their kids. Those tickets cost more than some people make in a month." The words hit Kai like a slap. He thought about all those nights his mom had worked double shifts, all the times she had eaten peanut butter sandwiches for dinner so he could have something better. She had sacrificed so much to buy him this ticket. "She does too make enough money," he said, his voice stronger now. "She works really hard." "Look, kid," Patricia said, her fake sweetness completely gone now. "I don't know how you got this boarding pass, but there's no way it's legitimate. Kids like you don't fly first class." The words "kids like you" hung in the air like a dark cloud. Kai felt every eye in the boarding area turn toward him. Some people were starting to take out their phones. What do you mean, kids like me? Kai asked, even though part of him already knew the answer. Monica crossed her arms. I think you know exactly what we mean. Now, do you want to tell us the truth about where you got this ticket? Or do we need to call security? Kai's hand started to shake. I already told you the truth. My mom bought it. She has the receipt at home. I can call her right now if you want. Oh, we're definitely going to call someone, Patricia said, reaching for her radio. Security to gate B12. We have a situation with a fraudulent boarding pass. The word fraudulent felt like being punched in the chest. Kai had never been accused of anything like this before. He was a straight-A student who had never even gotten in trouble at school for talking too much. Please, he said, his eyes starting to water. Just call my mom.
She can explain everything.
Her number's in my phone. But Patricia was already talking to security on her radio. Yeah. We've got a minor here with what appears to be a fake first-class boarding pass. Looks like he might have stolen it or found it somewhere. Other passengers were definitely recording now. Kai could see phone screens pointed in his direction. Some people looked concerned, but others seemed entertained, like this was some kind of show for them to watch. A businessman in an expensive suit stepped out of line. Excuse me, ladies, but I've been standing here for 10 minutes. Can we move this along? Some of us have important meetings to get to. We're sorry for the delay, sir, Monica said quickly. We just need to handle this security issue first. Security issue? The man looked at Kai with surprise. He's just a kid. A kid with a suspicious boarding pass, Patricia explained. These things happen more than you'd think. 2 airport security officers appeared, walking quickly toward the gate. They were both big men wearing uniforms and serious expressions. Kai had never been in trouble with any kind of police or security before, and seeing them approach made his legs feel weak. What seems to be the problem? The first officer asked. This child has presented what we believe to be a fraudulent boarding pass, Monica explained. He claims his mother, who is supposedly a nurse, bought him a first-class ticket. We think he either stole it, found it, or it's a fake. The security officer looked down at Kai. Son, is this true? Where did you get this boarding pass? My mom bought it for me, Kai said, his voice barely above a whisper now. She's not lying. I'm not lying. Please just call her. We're going to need to take you to our office to sort this out, the second officer said. We'll call your mother from there. But my flight, Kai said desperately. I'm supposed to visit my grandmother. She's waiting for me. If everything checks out, we'll get you on the next flight, the first officer said. But right now we need to verify your story. As the security officers prepared to escort him away, more passengers had their phones out, recording everything. Someone in the crowd shouted, "This is ridiculous! He's just a child." But Patricia and Monica stood firm in their decision. They watched with satisfied expressions as Kai was led away from the gate, his small suitcase in one hand and his boarding pass, the one his mother had worked so hard to buy, crumpled in his other hand. What none of them knew was that this video was already being uploaded to social media. Within minutes, it would be shared thousands of times. The hashtag Justice for Kai would start trending. News reporters would pick up the story. And somewhere in Atlanta, in a corporate boardroom filled with expensive suits and important papers, a man who had built an airline empire was about to see his phone light up with the most important notification of his life. The boy being humiliated in that video wasn't just any passenger. He was David Thompson's son, the child he had been trying to reconnect with for years, the son whose mother had asked him to stay away until he could prove he was ready to be a real father, but Kai didn't know any of that yet. All he knew was that the most important trip of his young life had just turned into a nightmare, and he was being treated like a criminal for trying to use a ticket his mother had bought with love and sacrifice. David Thompson sat at the head of a long conference table in the 42nd floor of Thompson Airline's headquarters in Atlanta. The meeting room had floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the busy airport below, where his planes took off and landed every few minutes like clockwork. He had built this company from nothing 15 years ago, starting with just one small plane and a dream to create an airline that treated every passenger with dignity and respect. Now Thompson Airlines had over 200 aircraft and flew to destinations all across the country. The quarterly numbers look excellent, his chief financial officer Janet was saying as she clicked through a presentation on the big screen. We're up 18% from last year and customer satisfaction ratings are at an all-time high. David nodded, but his mind was elsewhere. It was always elsewhere these days. Success in business had come easily to him, but success as a father? That was a completely different story. He thought about Kai constantly. His son was 12 now, almost a teenager. David had missed so much already. First steps, first words, first day of school, little league games, birthday parties. All because he had been too focused on building his company to be the father his family needed. When Linda had asked for the divorce, she hadn't been cruel about it. She had simply said, "You love this airline more than you love us, David, and until that changes, Kai and I deserve better." She had been right. At the time, David was working 18-hour days, traveling constantly, taking calls during dinner, missing important family events. He had justified it all by saying he was building something for their future. But what good was a future if you lost your family along the way? The divorce had been finalized when Kai was just 3 years old. Linda had asked for minimal contact, saying she needed to build a stable life for their son without the chaos of David's unpredictable schedule. He had agreed, thinking it would be temporary, thinking he could fix things once the company was more established. But years had passed and David had stayed away, sending money but keeping his distance. He told himself it was what Linda wanted. Deep down, though, he was afraid. Afraid that if he tried to be part of Kai's life and failed again, it would hurt his son even more. Linda had moved back to Miami to be closer to her mother. She had taken a job at the hospital and was raising Kai on her own. David made sure they were financially comfortable. He had set up college funds, paid for their apartment, made sure Kai had everything he needed. But he did it all from a distance like a guardian angel who was too scared to show his face. "Mr. Thompson," Janet's voice cut through his thoughts. "Did you hear the question about the new route to Seattle?" "I'm sorry," David said, shaking his head to clear it. "Could you repeat that?" Before Janet could answer, David's assistant, Rebecca, burst through the conference room doors. Her face was pale and she was holding her tablet with shaking hands. "Mr. Thompson," she said breathlessly, "I'm sorry to interrupt, but you need to see this immediately." "Rebecca, we're in the middle of a board meeting," David said with a frown. "Can't it wait?" "No, sir, it can't." She walked quickly to his chair and held out the tablet. "It's about your son." The blood drained from David's face. On the screen was a video that had been posted to social media 20 minutes ago. The caption read, "12-year-old boy humiliated by airline staff, accused of stealing first-class ticket." David's hands trembled as he took the tablet. There on the screen was Kai, his Kai, standing at a gate counter looking small and scared. David could see Linda's features in the boy's face, but also his own eyes, his own stubborn chin. He watched in horror as the gate agents questioned his son, as they called security, as they treated the child like a criminal. Every word felt like a knife in his heart. When he heard them say, "Kids like you don't fly first class," David's jaw clenched so tight he thought his teeth might crack. "Where is this happening?" he asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Miami International," Rebecca said. "Gate B12. The video has already been shared over 50,000 times. The news stations are starting to pick it up." David stood up so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "Get my plane ready now, sir." Rebecca looked confused. "My private jet. I want it fueled and ready for takeoff in 10 minutes. And I want a car waiting for me at Miami International. But sir, your meetings..." "Cancel them. Cancel everything." David was already walking toward the door. "And get Miami Airport Management on the phone. I want to know exactly which employees are involved in this situation." The board members sat in stunned silence as David stormed out of the conference room. They had never seen their calm, composed CEO lose his cool like this. In the elevator going down to the parking garage, David called his head of security. "Tom, it's David. I need you to get me everything you can on what's happening at Miami International right now. My son is being held by airport security, and I need to know his exact location." "Your son?" Tom sounded surprised. David had never talked about his personal life at work. "What's the situation?" "Watch the news," David said grimly. "It'll be everywhere in the next hour." As his driver sped toward the private airfield, David tried calling Linda. The phone rang and rang before going to voicemail. She was probably at work, dealing with patients. Not knowing that their son was going through the worst experience of his young life, he left a message. "Linda, it's David. Something's happened to Kai. He's okay. But there's been an incident at the airport. I'm on my way to Miami right now. Please call me as soon as you get this." Then he called the Miami airport directly, demanding to speak to whoever was in charge. When the airport manager came on the line, David didn't waste time with pleasantries. "This is David Thompson, CEO of Thompson Airlines. In the next 3 hours, I'm going to be at your airport, and I want a full report on exactly what happened to my son at gate B12. I want the names of every employee involved, security footage, and a complete timeline of events." "Mr. Thompson," the manager stammered, "I'm not sure what you're referring to." "Check social media," David cut him off. "Then check it again. By the time I land in Miami, this story is going to be national news. You have 3 hours to get me answers." During the flight to Miami, David couldn't stop watching the video. Each time he saw Kai's face, confused, hurt, trying so hard to be brave, his anger grew. This was exactly why he had started the airline in the first place. He had faced discrimination himself as a young black entrepreneur, trying to get loans, trying to be taken seriously in the aviation industry. He had sworn that his airline would be different. That every passenger, regardless of age, race, or economic status, would be treated with dignity and respect. He had trained his staff personally on these values. He had made it a core part of the company culture, and now his own employees had violated everything he stood for. They had humiliated his son, the most important person in his world, the child he had been too afraid to get close to but had never stopped loving. As the plane began its descent into Miami, David made a decision. This wasn't just about fixing a public relations disaster. This wasn't just about disciplining employees who had stepped out of line. This was about his son. This was about being the father he should have been all along. This was about finally putting his family first, even if it was 12 years too late. The boy in that video needed his father. And for the first time since Kai was born, David Thompson was going to put everything else aside and be exactly where his son needed him to. But even if Kai didn't know yet that the man coming to rescue him was the same father he had wondered about his whole life, Kai sat in a small, windowless office deep inside Miami International Airport, his legs swinging from a chair that was too big for him. The security officers had been kind enough once they got him away from the gate, but he still felt like he was in trouble for something he didn't do. A woman from Child Services had arrived about an hour ago. Her name was Mrs. Rodriguez, and she had gentle eyes and a soft voice. She had brought him a sandwich and a juice box, but Kai's stomach was too twisted up to eat much. "Your mother is on her way," Mrs. Rodriguez told him for the third time. "She got off work as soon as she got the message. She should be here within the hour." Kai nodded, but he felt terrible about ruining his mom's day at work. She had probably had to leave in the middle of helping patients. She would lose pay for leaving early, and money was always tight. "I keep telling everyone," Kai said quietly. "The ticket is real. My mom showed me the receipt and everything." "I believe you, honey," Mrs. Rodriguez said. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Big mistakes." Through the small window in the office door, Kai could see people in suits walking back and forth in the hallway. They looked important and stressed, like something big was happening. He had heard bits of conversations, something about news reporters and a video going viral. He didn't understand what that meant, but he had a sinking feeling it had something to do with him. About 2 hours after he had been brought to the office, there was a commotion in the hallway. Kai could hear multiple voices, some of them angry, some of them nervous. Mrs. Rodriguez stepped outside for a moment, closing the door behind her. When she came back, her expression had changed. She looked surprised and a little excited. "Kai," she said, sitting down across from him, "some very important people have just arrived at the airport. They want to talk to you and make sure you're okay." "Important people? Like the police?" "No, honey. People from the airline, including—" She paused like she wasn't sure how to explain. "Including the man who owns the whole company." Before Kai could ask what that meant, the door opened again. A man in an expensive suit walked in, followed by several other people with serious expressions and tablets in their hands. But Kai only saw the first man. He was tall, probably around his mom's age, with kind eyes and strong shoulders. His skin was brown like Kai's, and something about his face seemed familiar in a way that made Kai's chest feel tight. The man stopped when he saw Kai, and his breath caught like he had been running. His eyes got watery, and he looked like he might cry. "Kai?" the man said softly. "Yes, sir," Kai replied politely, the way his mom had taught him to address adults. The man knelt down so he was at Kai's eye level. "My name is David Thompson. I own Thompson Airlines." Kai's eyes went wide. This was the person whose name was on every plane, every boarding pass, every uniform the flight attendants wore. You own the whole airline? I do, David said. And I came here personally to apologize to you for what happened today. What those employees did was wrong. Very, very wrong. Thank you, sir, Kai said, still confused about why the owner of an entire airline would come just to talk to him. But it's okay. I mean, it's not okay, but you don't have to apologize. You weren't there. David's heart was breaking. His son was sitting right in front of him, being polite and forgiving even after being treated so badly. Even after David himself had been absent for so many years. Kai, David said carefully, I need to tell you something important, something that might be confusing or hard to understand. Mrs. Rodriguez and the other officials were watching quietly. They had been briefed on the situation, but seeing it unfold was something else entirely. Okay, Kai said, though he looked nervous. David took a deep breath. Your last name is Johnson, right? That's your mother's last name. Yes, sir. But your father's last name is Thompson. Kai stared at him. The words didn't make sense at first. Then slowly, understanding began to dawn on his face. You mean... Kai's voice was barely a whisper. You mean I'm your father, Kai. The room was completely silent. Kai looked at David's face, really looked at it, and suddenly he could see the resemblance. The eyes, the shape of the nose, even the way David held his shoulders. But Mom said you were a businessman who traveled a lot. Kai said, his voice shaking. I am. I do travel a lot, too much. David's voice was thick with emotion. And I'm sorry, son. I'm so sorry I haven't been part of your life. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me. I'm sorry it took something like this for us to finally meet. Kai didn't know what to say. He had imagined meeting his father 1,000 times, but never like this. Never in an airport security office after being accused of stealing a ticket to fly on his father's own airline. You really own all those planes? Kai asked because it was easier than dealing with the bigger questions. David laughed through his tears. Every single one. And you know what? That first-class ticket your mother bought you? You didn't just deserve that seat, Kai. You could have any seat on any plane I own anytime you want. Mom worked so hard to buy that ticket, Kai said. She saved for months. I know she did. Your mother is an incredible woman, and she's done an amazing job raising you. You're polite and kind and brave. Everything I hoped you would be. But why? Kai struggled to find the words. Why didn't you want to see me before? David felt like someone had punched him in the chest. Oh, Kai, it wasn't that I didn't want to see you. I wanted to see you every single day. But I was scared. Scared of what? Scared that I wouldn't be a good father. Scared that I would mess up and hurt you. So I stayed away thinking that was better for you. But I was wrong. I was so wrong. Just then, there was another commotion in the hallway and Kai heard a voice that made him jump up from his chair. Where is he? Where is my son? Mom, Kai called out. The door burst open and Linda Johnson rushed in, still wearing her nurse scrubs from the hospital. Her hair was messy. Her eyes were red from crying and she looked like she had run all the way from the parking garage. She scooped Kai into her arms and held him so tight he could barely breathe. Are you okay, baby? Are you hurt? I came as soon as I got the message. I'm okay, Mom, Kai said into her shoulder. But Mom, he's here. Linda looked up and saw David standing across the room. For a moment, nobody moved. It had been almost 10 years since they had been in the same room together. Hello, Linda, David said quietly. David. Her voice was carefully neutral. I should have known you'd show up once it hit the news. This isn't about the news, David said. This is about our son. Linda looked back and forth between David and Kai, seeing her son trying to process everything that was happening. We need to talk, she said. All three of us. But first, I want to know exactly what happened here today, and I want to know what you're going to do about it. David straightened his shoulders. He was back in CEO mode, but this time he was fighting for his family instead of just his company. The employees involved have already been suspended, he said. There will be a full investigation, policy changes, and retraining for all staff. But more importantly, I want to make this right with Kai. I want to make everything right. And what does that mean exactly? Linda asked, still holding their son protectively. David looked at Kai, then back at Linda. It means I want to be the father I should have been all along. If you'll let me. Kai looked up at his mother, then over at David, then back at his mother again. His whole world had just turned upside down. But somehow, for the first time in hours, he felt like everything might actually be okay. 3 months later, Kai stood in front of a room full of Thomson Airlines employees, his heart pounding but his voice steady. He was wearing a suit that actually fit him properly, not too big, not too small, and a name tag that read Kai Thompson Johnson, Youth Advisory Board. "My name is Kai," he began, looking out at the faces of pilots, flight attendants, gate agents, and ground crew members. 3 months ago, I was just a regular kid trying to visit my grandmother. Today, I'm here to tell you my story so that what happened to me never happens to another child. In the back of the room, David and Linda sat together, watching their son with pride. It hadn't been easy these past 3 months. There had been difficult conversations, family therapy sessions, and a lot of tears. But slowly, carefully, they were building something new together. After the airport incident, David had kept his word about consequences. Patricia and Monica, the gate agents who had humiliated Kai, were not just fired. They were banned from working at any Thomson Airlines facility ever again. The security supervisors who had supported their decision faced suspension and mandatory retraining. But David knew that firing a few people wasn't enough. The problem was bigger than just a few bad employees. "We're going to rebuild our training program from the ground up," he had announced at a company-wide meeting the week after the incident. "Every single employee, from baggage handlers to executive management, will go through bias awareness training. And it's not going to be some boring slideshow presentation. We're bringing in real experts, real people who have experienced discrimination, to teach us how to do better." The story had indeed become national news, just as David had predicted. But instead of running from the publicity, Thomson Airlines had embraced it as an opportunity for change. They partnered with civil rights organizations, hired diversity consultants, and created new policies that made discrimination grounds for immediate termination. More importantly, they had created the Youth Advisory Board with Kai as its first member. The idea was simple. If airlines were going to serve young passengers, they needed to understand what those passengers needed and how to treat them with respect. "I was scared that day," Kai continued in his presentation, "not just because I was flying alone for the first time, but because the adults who were supposed to help me made me feel like I didn't belong. Like there was something wrong with me." In the audience, a flight attendant named Jennifer raised her hand. Kai had gotten to know her over the past few months. She was one of the good ones, someone who genuinely cared about making passengers feel welcome. "Kai," she said, "what should we do when we see a young passenger who seems out of place or nervous? How do we help without making assumptions?" Kai smiled. This was exactly the kind of question he had been hoping for. Just be kind. Ask if they need help. Don't assume anything about them or their family or whether they deserve to be there. And remember that kids can be scared even when they're not doing anything wrong. After the presentation, Kai joined his parents in David's office on the top floor of the Thomson Airlines building. The office had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the Atlanta skyline, and Kai still couldn't quite believe that his father owned all of this. "You did great up there," Linda said, giving him a hug. "I'm so proud of how you handled those questions." "Thanks, Mom." Kai looked over at David. "Did I do okay, Dad?" The word dad still felt new in Kai's mouth, but it was getting easier each time. David's eyes lit up every time he heard it. "You were perfect," David said. "Better than perfect. You're going to make a real difference for kids who travel alone." It was true. In just 3 months, Thomson Airlines had already seen changes. Reports of discrimination had dropped to almost zero. Customer satisfaction scores were at record highs, and other airlines were starting to copy their training programs. But the real change was happening in David's personal life. He had moved back to Miami, buying a house just 15 minutes from the apartment where Linda and Kai lived. He was still CEO of the airline, but he had promoted capable executives to handle day-to-day operations so he could focus on being present for his family. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he picked Kai up from school. Every other weekend, Kai stayed at his house. They were taking things slow, building trust, learning how to be father and son after so many years apart. "Are we still on for Saturday?" David asked. "The baseball game?" "Definitely," Kai said with excitement. "I can't wait to see the Marlins play." "And Mom said she might come too," Linda smiled. I might be able to make it if I'm not working. The relationship between Linda and David was complicated. They weren't getting back together. Too much time had passed for that. But they were learning to be co-parents, to put Kai's needs first, and to support each other in raising their son. "Oh," David said, pulling an envelope from his desk drawer. "This came for you today." Kai opened it and found a handwritten letter from his grandmother Rose in New York. He had finally made it to visit her a month after the airport incident, flying in David's private jet with both his parents along for the trip. "Dear Kai," he read aloud, "I saw you on the news again yesterday talking about the airline's new programs. Your grandfather would be so proud of the young man you're becoming. You're using a bad experience to help other children, just like he used to say we should do. Turn our pain into purpose." Kai smiled. His grandmother had a way of making everything sound wise and important. The letter continued. "I'm feeling much better now, and the doctors say I can travel again soon. Maybe next time I can visit you in Miami instead of you always coming to see me. Your father says he has a guest room ready for me anytime. It would be nice to spend time with all three of my favorite people in one place." "She wants to visit?" Linda asked, reading over Kai's shoulder. "Apparently I told her she's welcome anytime," David said. "I hope that's okay." Linda nodded. "She'd like that. She's been wanting to see you again for years, but she didn't want to interfere." It was another small step in their complicated family healing process. There were still difficult days, still moments when old hurts surfaced, still times when Kai felt confused about having a father who had been absent for so long. But there were also good days. Days when David helped with homework, when they played basketball in the driveway, when Kai called him just to talk about his day. Days when it felt like they might actually become a real family, even if it looked different from what most families looked like. "You know what the best part is?" Kai said, looking out the window at one of his father's planes taking off in the distance. "Now when kids get on those planes, they're going to be treated like they matter, like they belong there." "That's right," David said. "And it's because of you. Because you were brave enough to speak up, even when adults weren't listening." Kai thought about that 12-year-old boy who had stood at gate B12 3 months ago, scared and confused but determined to visit his grandmother. He thought about how different his life was now, how much more complicated but also how much fuller. "I'm glad it happened," he said finally. I'm not glad it was bad, but I'm glad it led to this, to us." David put his arm around his son's shoulders and Linda smiled at them both. Outside the window, another Thompson Airlines plane lifted off into the blue sky, carrying passengers who would be treated with dignity and respect, no matter what they looked like or how old they were. It had taken a painful moment of injustice to bring this family together. But sometimes, Kai thought, the best things in life come from the hardest experiences. Sometimes you have to go through something difficult to find out who you really are, and who will stand by you when it matters most. And now he knew. He had a mother who would work double shifts to buy him first-class tickets, a father who would move mountains to protect him, and a grandmother who thought he was wise beyond his years. Most importantly, he had found his own voice, the courage to speak up when something was wrong and the determination to help make things better for others. That was worth more than any first-class seat could ever be.